Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emily Henderson with eTrack, and I'm here with Dirk McLeod of Highlander Tech. You guys tuned in today to hear us talk about visibility. So just to introduce Dirk, he is the CEO of Highlander Tech. So Highlander Technology is a really interesting, to use the term, visibility company. They provide great services that really drill into the final mile information and help companies gain better visibility, make better deliveries, improve their service. He has a lot of experience in distributorships, and he has experience on the shipping side of things as well prior to starting Highlander Tech. So we're really excited to have him here with us today. Thanks for joining us, Dirk.
Yep, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah. Well, just to get us started, where are we with visibility right now as opposed to where it's going? What's our starting point?
So I think visibility, as everyone would agree, is probably the hottest term in the industry these days. It seems like everybody has a visibility product, and as you and I were talking the other day, that what really is visibility. There's visibility of being able to see the product being delivered, but I think it's kind of gotten a lot broader as more and more companies have gotten into it. But I guess where I see visibility. It's kind of first, middle, and last mile. The first mile is probably a bigger challenge today with having visibility. There's just so many different players if you're sourcing goods from other countries. So I think that's probably a little ways away. I think right now is probably when everybody wished they had it the most on the first mile, with all the container ship parked offshore at the ports. It would probably be nice for everybody to know where their container is and where it stands in line, but I think that's going to be a while. On the final mile piece, I think it's going along pretty well. I think most people offer or have a visibility product. I think the LTL is probably a little further behind. They typically are a little further behind with adopting some technology. But I'll tell you a funny story about visibility. My next door neighbor, his son-in-law works for UPS, and we were having a conversation about visibility. And I was asking him about having, sometimes when you look in the app and it says that there is a product that's out for delivery and then you never get it, or it's at a certain facility and and then it doesn't come the next day. He said that they actually aren't presenting a scan for every box. They actually project where a box should be, and it could be updated within their app of where it should be, but it's not actually there. So, I guess it kind of begs the question of how accurate is visibility, because I think a lot of it is just a prediction, kind of like ETA, but they predict where it should be, and that's kind of where they show it. And so I think that's kind of where really where a blind spot is right now, and a lot of that'll have to do with technology.
Sure. Well, you just answered one of my main questions. I live in a secondary market, maybe even a tertiary market for some, and we have a big three distributor a few, probably 50 miles away from us, where a lot of our packages go through, and we call it the black hole, because they go there, and then it might be another week before they come back out. So every day it says out for delivery, but it's never out for delivery. So, we talk about it on social media a lot. It's a common issue in the area.
Yeah, and that's what's happening, But and I guess my thought would have been with UPS, since they own the box pretty much through the process from picking it up to delivering it, and they're scanning everything, that you would think they would have it. But I think people assume a lot of things today, even with the UPS and FedEx, that as big as they are, their technology has got to be the best, and they've got to be able to do this and that. But I don't think we're truly there. And as we'll probably talk about several things today, the longer I'm in this space, the more things I learn that I just assumed were happening a very different way, but they're really not. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've touched on it just a little bit here, but why does current visibility leave a lot to be desired from the shipper side and the consumer side?
I think that, my viewpoint is that really the biggest problem today with, visibility is the lack of good location data that the providers have to work with. You know, if you think about last mile, especially, visibility products really gain traction because carriers aren't able to provide, you know, a very accurate ETA. They may give you, you know, a 6-hour time window. Well, you know, if you got a 6-hour time window, that's kind of frustrating. But I think the visibility app kind of filled that need short term, where you were able to now look on a map, hopefully with some carriers, and see where it is so that you know. You know, I don't think that's the solution to the problem by any means. You know, we had a problem when I was running a distributor. I ran a wine and spirits distributor for about 12 years, and our customers had 2-hour time windows, okay? And if you missed the time window, you had to come back the next day. So that was a huge problem for our drivers, because if you think about a driver, if you're driving a truck and you're out and you miss a time window and they won't take delivery, all of a sudden you have these boxes in the back of your truck that you have to work around. And I can't tell you how many workers' comp claims we experience because drivers are sitting there having to, you know, reach over a stack of boxes to pick a box up. So there's a lot of problems with, you know, not getting the delivery off the truck on time, you know, the first time. I think problems that most people don't even think about, but workers' comp was a huge problem for us if we couldn't get it off. But luckily for us, you know, our customers, we delivered at least once a week. So, you know, as we're looking at our routing problem, you've got a drive time and a service time. And our big issue was service time. There's your dog. You said that he would make an appearance, and there it is. But, you know, so for us, we were actually logging actual service time for every customer. And once we were able to collect that data and put it into RoadNet, which is what we use for routing, you know, we were able to solve the problem. And I think that's kind of was my vision for Highlander Tech, is to bring some real location data to the market to help, you know, like ETA, to help people calculate the service time, because, you know, the industry standard is really just to plug in a static service time for all stops. And, you know, if you drive down the street and look at every house or every business or every building, and you think about, if I had to deliver to some place at that location, they don't all take the same amount of time. You know, I stop and talk to Amazon delivery guys all the time, and they tell me that they're given, you know, 3 to 5 minutes is kind of their static number for all stops. And if they don't make their stops, then they're in trouble and they lose some bonus opportunity. And so it gets to be a point of contention, I think, with the drivers, but hopefully we'll help solve that problem.
Yeah, I think we've all seen the videos of them throwing the boxes out of the truck. I think it was you who posted that video.
My house. Yes, that was my house. She dropped it. She dropped one box down, then dropped another box on top of it, and then another box, and then she closed the door and left. And then 5 minutes later, it started pouring down rain. So that was my delivery. So it was a wonderful experience.
I'm sure. At least you had it on video. But
yes.
You have more sympathy when you realize they only have 3 minutes. Can
yes.
they make a driveway in 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So getting into customer experience, how does visibility tie in at the customer level? So where you're trying to provide that ultimate delivery experience every time, or at least an acceptable one where they're not going to leave you a negative review online. So how can a shipper get that information to make sure they're passing it down the line to make sure their customer has a good experience?
Well, you know, and if you think about any delivery, I guess, you know, I'm obviously biased, I know that, but, you know, if you think about the last mile, 53% of the total shipping cost is in the last mile because of the time it takes to make the delivery. And the time it takes to make delivery is based on the location. So, you know, for us, we look at it like a location type, like a private residence is a location type. A distribution center is a location type. Those are obviously two very different locations and two different deliveries requiring different equipment, quite honestly. Liftgate, you know, you don't want to bring a 53-footer into my neighborhood because it's all dead ends. You're not going to get out. But, you know, all those things kind of come into play. And so where we try to bring our product in is, you know, for the actual retailer shipper, either through their order management system or their transportation management system. So, you know, where they enter a postal code today, which doesn't make any sense, we have them enter an actual address, and then we'll populate within the TMS a location type for that location. So, if you think about location matters in the price you pay for shipping anything, on the parcel, it's residential, commercial, LTL, it's residential or limited access, but all of those carry an additional cost. And so you really need to know that up front to know what the true cost of that delivery is going to be. You've got to book the cost to your GL at the time of sale, but also you pass that information along to the carrier so they know, okay, I'm going to have to put this on a box truck, or I'm going to have to offload this to a 3PL that does, deliveries to private residences. But that information, if it comes in at the first of the transaction at checkout, in a lot of instances online, and just carries on throughout the process, it helps everybody with a more efficient and cost-effective delivery.
Yeah, and you touched on this just a second ago, and I want to get further into it because it's how we determine deliveries right now is that ZIP+4. So can you tell me a little more about what that is and why it's not the way to determine how you should deliver things?
Yeah, so if you think about, go way back in, deregulation trucking industry in 80, and pretty much, obviously, they're starting to ship across state lines. They had to have a way to price freight. So every postal code pair had a rate. So everything was priced based on postal code. And it still is today, quite honestly. So, which doesn't make much sense. But once mail order catalogs came along, deliveries started going to locations that weren't warehouses, that didn't have a dock. So there was this additional time required for each delivery. And so all these carriers needed a way to charge for that additional time. Okay, so what they found was within the Postal Service has what they call an RDI code, a residential delivery indicator. Okay, so if you think about the post office, they have the luxury of going down the street and stopping at every box, every mailbox. Okay, and typically they don't have to get out of their truck. But what they needed is they either had a commercial route or a residential route. And those are different size trucks based on the amount of mail that each stop will get. So what they did is they said, okay, let's separate each postal code into ZIP+4s. And each ZIP+4, we will label either residential or commercial. So basically they say if 70% of a ZIP+4 is commercial, then that ZIP+4 gets commercial and everything within it gets commercial, because they just needed it to sort mail. So it works for them. ZIP+4 is majority commercial. It goes on to a commercial route, residential on a residential route. Well, back to the whole industry, parcel LTL and everything, they adopted this residential commercial information so that they could charge for the delivery and be compensated for that additional time. And they're still doing it today. So if you wonder why people are like, why is my location considered commercial? Well, it's because your ZIP+4 is majority, commercial or residential. So, our information, we do everything based at the address level. We don't worry about ZIP+4. And what we have found is, as much as 18% of the residential surcharges are incorrect from UPS and FedEx, which is kind of surprising, but I think people would be surprised to know the information that they're actually using today for location and really how bad it is. But it serves the Postal Service's needs perfectly. Everybody just adopted it and assumed it did more, and most people I talk to today don't even understand where that information comes from. But that's kind of how we got started at Highlander Tech, and that's why we're trying to provide a more accurate address level location information to help solve the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So UPS or USPS set up a standard, everybody adopted it, but actual UPS and FedEx use, and pretty much every other carrier and TMS system use different ways to deliver. So even though USPS does it one way, you actually need different address information to make your delivery. So assuming you now have this visibility, because we know it's available now, right? We're not just using USPS anymore. We have companies like Highlander Tech who do it based on actual information, residential versus commercial, to help make those deliveries. How are companies going to use that insight to change their final mile strategy?
Well, so if you think about today, I mean, if you're an e-commerce retailer, you really you have two chances to make a good to provide a good customer experience. Checkout, which they say, if checkout is convoluted and difficult, 70% of those people, will abandon the shopping cart. So you've got checkout, which checkout is where you get your delivery options and the pricing of freight. All of those depend on location. Everybody uses postal code, so no one's providing a good checkout experience today. But against everybody else, it's not. But your second thing is the delivery experience. I mean, I myself got a table saw delivered a couple of years ago. The LTL carrier comes to my house, he drops it on the street. I live up on a hill, and the LTL carrier is like, okay, here you go, sign for it. I'm like, well, how do I get it to my garage? He was like, well, we only provide curbside service, and most LTL carriers, that is all they provide. So, our thing is that the retailer that I purchased that product from, they should, if they knew it was a private residence, then they have the ability to give it to a carrier, like a lot of these third parties and local guys. I mean, they make their business in smaller box trucks making deliveries to people's houses. So, let's surface that information earlier in the process so that you can give it to a carrier that can actually provide that service. Because, I mean, anybody that knows and had a bad delivery, the bad review goes back on the retailer's website. It doesn't go on the carrier's website. So it's the retailer that's stuck with somebody complaining. And I look at these sites all the time, but it's, everybody's complaining. They gave me this 12-hour, Home Depot gave me a 14-hour time window a couple of weeks ago. I mean, who can be home at 14 hours sitting around waiting for a delivery?
Right.
But it's all about the location information. It just kind of goes on and on and on.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that UPS and FedEx are wrong about 18% of the time on commercial versus residential, which means your bills are wrong roughly 18% of the time. That's where parcel auditing comes in. That's where a lot of these companies have stepped in and started helping companies do that. If the visibility is improved on the technology side, do you still need parcel auditing?
Well, I'll tell you the funny thing about parcel auditing. Used to, everything was kind of post-payment parcel audit. So after you got the invoice, then you would give it to your auditor, and he's going back to find savings, and then they would split the savings. Okay. And that actually worked because the auditor is incentivized to find as much as possible so they can make more money. Today, the majority of your auditors, they charge a flat monthly rate. So if Emily Inc. is a retailer and a large retailer, I'm going to charge you a flat monthly rate to provide a lot of services other than just audit. So they obviously do a lot of things today that they used to not do. But when you get back to the residential surcharges, those auditors are using RDI code just like the carriers are, so they typically don't find anything different. We have been talking to freight auditors, and we have run some lists for them and found significant savings for their customer. And then the interesting part is, once you quote them a price, they're like, well, we're not interested, because if I pay you X amount of dollars, that's X amount of dollars that comes out of my profit for my customer. So, it's kind of a funny place today. So, for us, we're not going to solve the problem for the retailer on the back end for the auditor. It's got to be on the front end so that the audit doesn't have to happen in the first place, because that's just the way the industry's kind of gone. So it's been kind of interesting. The retailers, I think they assume a lot of stuff is happening. That's probably not today. And I'll tell you, something even more surprising with, dealing with our freight auditor customers is the address validation. Okay, this is kind of going back to the USPS again, where used to with the mainframe, if you needed to match some text, call it an address, it had to be character for character match, or a mainframe sees it as something totally different. Well, like today, as I'm looking at charges for some shippers, address correction charges, which are $18. If you spell out drive, okay, like UPS will shorten it to DR, and then they'll charge you $18. Okay, so I don't know if anybody's ever tried to put drive in their geocoder or their GPS in their car and it come back and say, sorry, I can't make this delivery because that's not a valid address. So, today it's a really funny place that you have to abbreviate everything for it to be valid, when that shouldn't make any difference. Today you can spell it. Even DR period, they're going to charge you $18 for taking DR period down to DR. But I don't think people really understand what's really going on, because I don't think they see the bills. And, quite honestly, it's hard to get that money back from UPS after it's already happened. So, it's really it's crazy for any shipper to be paying that money, because, there are services, we have a service. We know every address. We know every secondary address that exists at that address. And all you have to do is pick the correct one, and it's, you don't have that problem. So, for us, it's kind of educating people, because I don't think the majority of the industry really understands how bad the data is. Now, it's not bad for the Postal Service. It works for them, but, the Postal Service does lose $9 billion a year right now. So that's not a good operating model. So, it's time for the industry to move along, and start, putting more, everybody likes to say ML and AI, but, ML and AI is only as good as the data you feed it. So there's a lot of holes that are left to be filled for location information in the industry today.
Yeah, for sure. And so they're making a lot of their money with charging you $18 a parcel. So that's really eating into that bottom line.
Yeah, or surcharges too.
Yeah. So from a shipper's perspective, you've been a shipper in the past. Is that something you would have leaned on another company to do for you, instead of saying, hey, it's my job to make sure the visibility's there. It's my job to make sure, because now not only is it going to affect your delivery experience, that LTL carrier dropping it off at the bottom of your driveway, you're going to get charged a good bit for it if you get it wrong.
Correct. Yeah, no, I think people are starting to see that now. Location just hasn't been a big part of the process in the past. But I think now, if you talk about, you look at UPS, their driver does, 120 stops a day on average. And if you think about when them trying to be as efficient as possible, it's like every minute matters when you're routing that truck, and how long it takes to service a location. It all costs money. And the more it costs UPS, obviously they're not going to eat that cost. They're going to pass it along to the retailer. So shipping costs are going up. So the retailer, obviously they're going to pass it along to the consumer. So, my view on the whole thing, I think that the ultimate solution, and as we kind of talked about capacity, is the retailers and the carriers are going to have to, form a better partnership and work together to create delivery density and to bring down costs and create some efficiency. Because today, I think from a lot of the LTL carriers that I know, they give a quote to a shipper based on postal code, and then they make a delivery, and then they send an invoice to the shipper that is the quote plus a residential or limited access charge. Same for UPS. So then you have a shipper that had a quote, it doesn't match the invoice, so they short pay it. So then you've got the carrier trying to chase the shipper and chase their AR, and there just creates this, this confusion and quite honestly a bad situation between the two, when all they've got is each other. So if the retailer can collect all the information, which is why we want to insert it on the front end, pass it along to the carrier, they know what their true cost is, the invoice matches the quote, then they're working together as a team, and everything's more efficient and more timely, and deliveries get started making on time. So I think that you're going to have to see more of that, because Amazon, look, they control everything. They all of their stuff is going on their trucks, so they kind of control that experience. But none of the other retailers have that ability today. So they're going to have to start working better, with their carrier partners, and provide as much information as possible, because the carrier doesn't want to charge you more. They just don't have the information on the front end. You're not giving it to them. So it's kind of the retailer's responsibility to give that information to them so they can get it done, because they don't want to leave boxes on the truck. That's a bad situation for them.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And we've talked a lot about experience and cost. So supply chain has become really a competitive advantage for companies. I'm going to say the word Amazon. it's a reason why people shop with you. It's a reason why they don't shop with you, depending on your supply chain. So right now, does anybody have this visibility? Are they using these tactics, and how is it giving them an advantage in the end?
Very few people are. I mean, if you think about every TMS out there or order management system, I mean, everything, all quotes, they're all driven off postal code. They may give you a box, check the box if this is residential, or check the box if it's limited access or restricted access or needs a lift gate. But I mean, who has time to look up all that? And people I talk to, they're like, oh, we look up on Google Maps. Well, that's obviously not a good use of anyone's time. So there needs to be a way to automatically fill that information in and let them spend their time, doing better things, more useful things to the company. But it plays a big part. It's your delivery experience is the last impression you can make on a consumer.
Sure. And for companies who aren't using UPS, FedEx, or the bigger companies who are using more of a regional or local carrier who's going to have more specific services and service types, how can they use this visibility that they're getting on the front end now to determine and build a better network?
Well, and I think eTrack plays right into this. Y'all bring to the table to a TMS with an easily integrated API. You've got some carriers, more carriers than just your big ones or even your bigger regional carriers. So you have more carriers to choose from. The big question is how do you choose which carrier? Really, it's if it's a private residence, you ought to pick some of these smaller carriers because they're going to provide a better delivery experience. Don't give it to a big LTL carrier. Some of them, are doing a good job with last mile and they're focusing on that, but others really don't want it anyway. And they either want to know early and so that they can give it to somebody off of their dock, or better yet, let you pick, a carrier that can provide that service through the TMS early. But it is quite honestly, it's very new. It's a problem that people are having to deal with now. It's like, you think about the capacity crunch, and you've got FedEx that one day they tried to drop 1,400 customers. Well, I guarantee you there were a lot of deliveries within those 1,400 customers that they made good money on, but one customer is one customer. They don't look at it based on the location of their delivery. So it's like, let's just not take their deliveries that are residential because that costs a lot more money, but let's keep all the other deliveries. And you don't put that shipper out, really. Cutting off a shipper in 1 day's notice would be a problem. Luckily, that didn't end up happening necessarily, but it's still out there and it's happening. Today you can't find a new carrier right now for the fourth quarter and the holiday. But so what are you going to do? But you need more information to help you choose a carrier because there are some guys out there that have some capacity. It's just hard to find them.
Yeah, and knowing more about your delivery and what you're delivering can help get you through the holidays. So which carriers can actually help and where you're going to be delivering it. Because if you're shortening those delivery times and able to get more done during the day, you can get more things delivered by Christmas. Everybody wins, right?
Yes, let's hope so. Well, I'll tell you an interesting thing that, recently you think about Walmart, they have their new kind of same day delivery service called, I think it's Go Local. And Home Depot is signed up with them. So I'm not sure what Roadie's doing now that UPS bought them because they were doing all of Home Depot's same day stuff. But you think about a Walmart, if there's a Home Depot near it and they have a same day going to a near location, then one driver can deliver stuff from both locations. So they're in essence creating some delivery density for their same day deliveries, which, lowers the cost. Think of your neighborhood. My neighborhood, there's like 150 homes in here. Every delivery service that exists in Atlanta comes into our neighborhood every single day. That's obviously we're never going to solve that problem, but we ought to be moving that direction. I don't think throwing more trucks and more cars at the problem is the long-term solution. There are already cities out there that are trying to limit the number of trucks that can come into the city. So it's going to be a bigger problem in the near future than it is now. So it's time for everybody to kind of put their heads together and figure out how to work together to solve it because it's going to hurt everybody.
Yeah, I believe it. So just to wrap it up, Dirk, what else is this new area era of visibility going to be bringing in? What else should companies be looking for and be expecting?
That's a very good question. I think it's going to be interesting. I think the most interesting part of it's going to be on the front end, so that I mean, obviously, you can't buy certain cars out there today because you can't get the chips that go in the car, or either the cars that are being produced, don't have certain functionality because they can't get a chip. And if you don't know where that is, it's hard to plan production. And if they can't plan production, everything downstream kind of slows down too. So, I think the visibility and the more location information and everybody with the visibility platform, it kind of brings everybody into the fold, and everybody kind of knows what's going on together, as they call it, control tower. So I think as everybody has more information about where things lie in their supply chain, it's going to help everybody. I mean, hopefully it helps us get more toilet paper and paper towel onto the shelves, because I know my wife stocks up, so we hoard it.
Yes. Yeah. And Christmas toys. Goodness gracious.
Yes. It's going to be an issue. Yes. Going to be an issue. Order now. Order now.
That's right. That's right. Hopefully we've all learned our lesson. Dirk, I really appreciate your time today. For everyone in the audience, if you'd like to learn more about Dirk, he is on LinkedIn. He's Dirk McLeod. His company is Highlander Tech. I believe his website is highlandertech.com.
Yep, TEK, highlandertek.com. Like there can be only one, if you're old enough to understand that reference.
I don't
Which
think
you probably are not, Emily.
Oh, I missed it. Sorry.
It's
I'm
a
gonna
movie. Sean Connery. It's a great one. So anyway,
I appreciate your time. Everybody have a great Wednesday, and you'll receive the recording if you'd like to share it with a friend shortly. All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Emily.